Hey guys, it's Alex. Due to some life issues, Alara and I could not meet up for filming, which is totally fine. So, for this next Futhark Friday, I will just be doing a voiceover and we'll leave you to enjoy a nature walk I took recently, and I'll just get right to it. So, the next rune in our set is Gebo. I'll insert a picture and the name right here somewhere. I always thought it was Gebo, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, but in all my pronunciation guides I have found recently, it's all gay boo. So I will trust the experts that have written books and a lot more material on this than I have. Let's just get cracking. Gebo translates into a gift. So what does that mean? That means it's a fair exchange, it's a sacrifice, being a giving person, balance in all things good and bad, reciprocation, altruism, but not in a sense of true altruism, because to really be so giving that you get nothing in return would also be non-balanced. So we will talk about that here in a second. But overall, this rune is the rune of generosity, hospitality, and appreciation. So going into what it's about more is this rune is about fair play. What goes around comes around, and thus there is balance. Gebo reminds one that if someone has shown kindness to you, you should repay it with kindness. Now, this can be anything from if someone gave you something, you could show appreciation through a kind word or a thank you note. Or if you're kind of like me, I like giving something back. So if I get a gift and I'm not totally broke at the moment, I would normally reciprocate that. If it's, if that person likes bracelets, I might get them a charm. If they like books, I'd either get them a book or maybe a gift certificate to like Barnes and Noble, half price books, what have you. Moving on. Now, it's not always monetary, right? So, like I just said, if someone gives you something, you can just be grateful for it. You don't have to necessarily give something physical back to them. So, like I said, kindness equal exchange. Now, going back to what I said a while ago about what goes around comes around. Now, a lot of people will interpret this as maybe not so nice, maybe not so positive all the time, and you'd be right. So if someone treats you with kindness, you should treat them with kindness back. And here's where people are going to get a little contingency, right? If someone does you a wrong and you are, I don't want to say, it's not always vindictive, right? So sometimes you want justice, right? So if someone's wronged you in the legal sense or anything like that where you could seek ramifications for that person, definitely I would recommend doing that before, say, hexing or anything else like that. Not that I don't think that's not an option, just if there are legal ramifications or ways for them to get their comeuppance where it matters in a societal way, I would go for that first, and then maybe throw some hexes or curses or whatever on top of that, right? Like, get them good. But I would always go for the what can be done quickest first, if I'm going to be honest. But a lot of people are under the assumption that all magic users or pagans, for instance, are of the belief that, do no harm, right? Like, do nothing bad, bad won't come at you and whatever. If you believe that, power to you. When someone's kind to you, be kind. If someone does something bad to you, handle it how you will, is basically what I'm getting there. This rune, like I was already talking about, Gebo, is a rune about balance, but we're gonna balance give and take, but let's look on a larger scale, right? So this can be anything from a neighbor thing to a society thing to all the way from you being a human to your relationship to the earth, right? You and the earth have an exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. we rely on the oceans for sustenance and water. Yes, we do eventually have to like cleanse it. If it's from a lake, a river, or what have you, it has to be purified because we can die if we drink bad water, right? But at the end of the day, water is natural. It comes from the sky. There are water cycles. There are all these things that are balanced. When they are not balanced, that's when we get into water shortages. That's where people start dying from lack of food, lack of water, because the crops don't grow and there's nothing to drink, right? So, again, balance. Like, where are you in the world with other things? Gebo also, we're going to go back to the rune from last week, Kenaz, real quick, talks about how Kenneth was talking about inheriting knowledge and truth from one's ancestors, kind of. Now, Gebo talks more specifically about the knowledge as applied to gifts, right? So, you know, gifts, talents, things you are talented at. So, again, if it's from ancestral pools, like if you're a painter or an artist or a creator of some kind, and your great great grandfather, great uncle, mom, whoever was also in that sense. Now, if this is for an ancestral altar, I would be careful with. I would not have living relatives on your ancestry altar. I have heard that is not a good thing to do. It is kind of like bad luck, I guess. Do what you will, though. I haven't heard if it's okay in certain aspects or not. But anyway, so to leave offerings for these ancestors of which you have inherited the talents, or if you don't do ancestral work, to leave offerings for a deity of your choosing. If you follow a deity, or if you are an artsy, creative person, maybe you just kind of leave something out for a deity of the arts, for instance. What have you. Now, you can do both or neither. This is really good tips for, I guess, people that do ancestry work or altar work in general. I don't happen to do that quite yet, but I am looking to do so. In that sense, though, kind of like how deities can bestow gifts or talents, just like your ancestors, one of my examples that I thought was kind of neat looking back on it was the example of Sleeping Beauty. And I'm talking about the 1958 movie, and maybe some of the different types of retellings that there's been. But when Aurora is born and the three fairies come and bless her, they are blessing her as a magical being type thing. So kind of like a deity for certain cultures, right? So Flora and Fauna both give her gifts of beauty and song. And of course, if y'all have watched the movie, you know Merryweather is interrupted by Maleficent showing up and being like, "Yo, what is going on? How dare you insult me?" Now, the thing to really remember there is that she was greatly insulted by not being invited, and, what goes around comes around. She repaid their unkindness with her own unkindness, which in this case was cursing a baby, which is a little much. But hey, that's what she does, right? And then in that same vein, Merryweather came back in and tried to alleviate the curse somewhat by also, again, trying to balance out the severity of it to be less severe, sleep instead of, death. So, again, balance in all things, good and bad. Don't go insulting fairies in general, if you can avoid it. Going back to what I said earlier, right? So, in all things, there is balance. And if we take more than we are willing to give back, we must also be willing to accept the consequences if we create that unbalance, right? So, you might not get hit with it, you might, but if you're willing to do something, good or bad, and not typically bad, I guess. Imbalance typically isn't a good thing, right? But you have to just, take with it what you will. You can't just, do something and then expect nothing to happen all the time. It's not how the world works at the end of the day. Now we're going to talk about the shape of Gebo. So, as you're seeing it, I'm going to reinsert it again just so while we're talking about it. It is an X. Now, this is top down, side to side. You can fold it in half, and it is even. Again, balanced. This rune is all about the balance, right? So, there are no real positives no, there are positives and there are negatives to the runes as a whole, right? But there aren't any specifically that are like if you draw this rune, boom, magic's gonna happen, right? It's just all positive all the time. And likewise, there's not really a rune that's just like all negativity all the time. Now, there are runes that, in my opinion, are a little heavier on either the positive or the negative side, but you know, how you will. For me, Gebo is typically a positive rune, so if it is drawn, like if you're doing a reading for yourself or for anyone else, or if you're getting a reading done, typically I would take it as a good sign because, for instance, most runes have, if you read inverted runes, have an inversion, like inverted version, correct? Like, so, like Fehu or whatever we've talked about, if it's an upside down F, it's an obvious, like, this is the negative aspect, right? Now, Gebo, being Gebu, is never, it's never flipped, it's never reversed, it looks the same top, bottom, left, right. So, for some people, that is a good sign because, in essence, there is not really a negative aspect. Now, there is a negative aspect, and we will get into that later, just like in all the other videos. But for me, as well as it being the 7th rune, which I feel like 7 is a pretty lucky number, I just feel like this one overall tends to be a good sign and not necessarily a bad one. Another quick note on Gebo, because it is talking about balance and sacrifice and working with others in a good way. There are runes that exemplify things like marriage and partnership a lot better than Gebu, but I did want to talk about it just really briefly here. Say you're asking a reader, or you're doing the reading for yourself, right? And you're asking about a partner, romantic, or a marriage, or, a fiance, an engagement, dating, what have you, and Gebo comes up. Gebo is, again, there to remind you that nothing comes without giving, right? You have to give and receive. It has to be balanced. There's got to be work put in by both of y'all, or more, whatever floats y'all's boats. No judgment here, obviously. But everyone's got to work at it, right? Like, you can't just be give, because the other person's just taking, and that's just an awful imbalance, quite honestly. Likewise, if you're just taking, you're not a good partner at the end of the day. You have to be willing to give and to take. And this is also kind of finding your balance within a partnership or a marriage. All relationships have some type of sacrifice involved, right? So don't go into something you are not prepared for at the end of the day. Now we're going to talk about Gebu's more negative aspects. Now, for most cases, rune negative aspects are almost always the opposite or the lacking of what the rune means originally. So, if you're doing a reading and, like I said, this one they can't be upside down, so even if you read negatively, it's not going to look negative to you. But if the reading is negative, you will feel that in a rune reading, and these are some of the things that can mean. This can mean anything from a strong imbalance, again, normally means balance, this would be an imbalance, of either something you are causing or you are in the middle of. It can be also, speaking of being overly dependent on something. Typically, I take it to mean you're overly dependent on someone. And that's just detrimental to one or both of you, right? Now, on the flip side, if you're so independent that you're lonely and it's negatively impacting you to be so lonely, that's also an imbalance. So don't be too independent, don't be too dependent. Balance in all things is the best way to go. The last little note I would have to kind of touch on, I didn't do a lot of readings on this one personally, but I feel that other people have surely noticed this, but if you are going into a deal and you are going in dishonestly, like if you're looking to, trade or gifting something with someone else and you are trying to, come out on top unfairly, even if you're selling something and you're trying to be sketchy to somebody else, yeah, you might get some comeuppance for that one. To recap, though, at the end of the day, what do you get out of Gebo? It's a rune of balance, right? So keep things in balance, you in aspect of the world around you, in dealings with your partners, your spouses, friends, family, children if you got them. And yeah, so balancing all things. So enjoy this giant spider at the end of this video. So sorry, but I thought it was so cool to have. And it was shaking from its weight, not the wind. There wasn't any wind in this part of the forest, so I was like, whoo, big one. One last note, I am sorry if certain angles made you dizzy or anything, but I was filming and walking and not realizing how much I was shaking. I will endeavor to do better if I ever do another one of these voiceover type things. Hopefully you enjoyed the video I did today. And if y'all like the voiceover aspects, we will endeavor to do more of those. And have a wonderful day, y'all. Bye.